Hey, what's up, Polyglot Conference? Before we get into the video, I would just like to say we're incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to speak to such gifted polyglots such as yourselves. But if you don't know us already, we're the Korekara Podcast. I'm Raza, and this is Eric over here. And we've interviewed a lot of Japanese learners from YouTube, such as Dogen, Matt vs. Japan, Miss Hanake, and even pop culture icons such as Eden Kai from Terrace House, and a lot more.
Yeah, and so in this episode, we talked to the #1 Japanese teacher on italki, who has clocked in at over 20,000 lessons, which is roughly equivalent to 8 hours per day for almost a decade. And if you're learning Japanese, on our channel, we actually have a Japanese version of this interview. So go check that out and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in learning Japanese. And hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Annie, can you tell us why you started to teach Japanese?
Alright, okay. So before 2009, I was an exchange student then I had many friends. And one of them, Jimmy in Canada, he suggested me to be a teacher, and I didn't want to be a teacher at the time. But he said, I want to learn Japanese from you. And I decided to be a teacher, and I studied a lot by myself to be a teacher. So I have to relearn Japanese grammar, right? I took a test, right, to be a teacher, and it was a charity.
So I guess now you've taught over 20,000 italki lessons, which is equivalent on average to 6 hours every day for 9 years. Do you know how many students you've taught at this point?
Yeah, some people told me about that, but I didn't notice, right? I don't care about that at all. So, now, average, I have 6 or 8 classes a day. It's not hard for me. It's okay.
I see. I find it pretty hard to be able to talk for that long. We do the podcast and we talk to our guests for a long time, but I don't think we could even handle that long of a conversation back to back to back to back to back.
So I forget what I said.
Do you ever mix up who the students are? Like you forget if this is this student or this is that student?
Yes, sometimes. So sometimes I talk English and Japanese. Sometimes a mix up, right?
Right.
It's too bad. Yeah, I think it's too bad, right?
I see. So for your students, what is the average level of Japanese they have when they're starting with you?
Very beginner level, right? From the very highest level, so not average. So average, it's difficult to say.
So you've taught many students, like we said before. What's the most common thing that you see foreigners struggle with in Japanese?
Particles.
Right.
Particle is difficult, I think.
So like
many
wa
people,
and ga?
Yeah, wa and ga and ni and de or
Right.
o, right?
I think a lot of Japanese people cannot even explain wa and ga like normally. But do you think it's useful to study these rules? Because like on our podcast, so we interview some people who are very good at Japanese, and they say you shouldn't study the rules. You should just listen to Japanese, and naturally you will know, oh, this time you should use wa, and for this time you should use ga. So do you think that's good, or do you think people should memorize the rules?
Yeah, that only listening is okay, like a child, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's okay. So or reading, right? Reading and listening, and they can learn particles so naturally, right? I think it's not bad.
Times on our podcast, we talk about how people who speak Korean or Chinese, it's easier for them to learn Japanese. And since you've taught so many different students, do you think some countries it's easier for them to learn Japanese?
So European people said so, but
Yeah.
for me, I think the people around the world is the same. So to learn Japanese, right? And grammar point is difficult, right? If they study a lot, do their best, they can improve. So, and I think the Chinese people, or it's not ready to learn.
Do you have any like funny or interesting stories of a student or a class that you had?
10 years ago, a student from Germany. He's very interesting. He cannot speak Japanese well, but he can speak English. And he wants to translate Japanese music and Japanese notes, right? And so I can help. And after that, he wanted to translate English to German, right?
Right.
So yeah, so very interesting. I could learn from him to German.
How long do you think you will continue teaching Japanese for?
I'm not sure for that. And I think until when I get the ranking.
Right.
I want to continue if some people want to talk with me.
Right.
So one joke that we have on the show is that a lot of people always hear 日本語が上手ですね. So how many times do you say that to your students?
I want to say because I want to encourage them, right? For me, it's joseness. It's not joking, right?
Yeah.
Just encouragement.
Right.
Oh, for me, right? For me. The other person, I don't know, right?
Yeah, and I guess probably a lot of people listening, they're studying Japanese now. So what advice do you have for people who are just starting to study Japanese?
Alright. So I'm very glad that there are so many people want to learn Japanese, right? And I didn't expect that. But I can say, and listening is important. So I can recommend to do that. First.
Yeah.
And second, and make Japanese native friend, right?
Right.
And talk.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good point to end the podcast. So yeah, I really want to thank you for coming onto our show, and it was an honor for us to talk to the #1 teacher on italki and hear about your experience. So yeah, thank you for coming on our podcast.
いいえ、こちらこそ。Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for making it to the end of this podcast. Like we said earlier, there's a Japanese version of this interview on our channel. And if you're interested in learning Japanese or interested in Japan at all, then definitely go check out our channel. Thank you guys for listening.